นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. People often ask, what is the word panya in wisdom? What does it mean in panya in Buddhism? What does it mean? And we often translate it as wisdom or knowledge, insight. Particularly might be defined as knowledge, insight into the Four Noble Truths, the Arya Satya Dhamma, which ultimately frees our heart, our mind from suffering and the causes of suffering, the mental defilements rooted in greed, anger and delusion. But at the same time, there's, you might say, many levels of wisdom, understanding that we talk about in Buddhism. To be a rare person, or they probably do exist, but a rare person who, on hearing the words of the Dhamma from the Buddha, or in this era from a teacher, be a rare person who immediately understands or penetrates the Four Noble Truths. At the very least, they probably have to think about it for a while, contemplate, practice. And many of us practice for many years before we fully understand or even partially understand. So wisdom often, comes in, we have moments of insight and then moments where we don't have much insight. We first of all understand maybe just with our memory. You hear some words of Dhamma and it seems to click, make sense, and you remember it. And if you have some real understanding, it probably stays with you a long time or becomes part of your way of looking at life and the world. Other aspects of Dhamma we hear, but it goes over our head or doesn't yet register. So the way wisdom, insight develops, it can take a long time. Sometimes they compare it to a process like curing or maturing something or ripening something, say like a fruit that is picked when it's unripe, like a banana or something, and then over time stored and it gradually ripens and softens. Or sometimes they even say almost like baking something in an oven. It starts off uncooked and over time, and sometimes many hours, gradually bakes and becomes cooked. Wisdom can be like that. You hear the Dhamma first, think about it, but maybe it doesn't really go in very deep. And then later on you think about it again, or with further experience, particularly if you start practicing the Dhamma, say like listening to the Dhamma, meditating, then over time maybe some of that wisdom does start to make sense. And then it's no longer just an external thing that you've acquired from reading or listening. It actually comes into your heart, and we say it becomes yours, at least partially or on one level. It becomes yours, your wisdom, your understanding. At first it was the wisdom of the Buddha or a teacher. Over time it becomes yours, you begin to own it, which is how it should be, I guess. When I was first in the monastery, I went to Thailand when you start your monastic training, you're an anagarika, you wear white, keep the 8 precepts. I was staying at Wat Pananachat, the international monastery, set up by Lumpur Cha, Lumpur Samedo. So this was a few years after it began. One day I was doing my anagarika, white-robed 8 preceptor duties at the kitchen. I was making an evening drink, which is one of my jobs. In those days you have to make a fire, actually make a fire, light it and boil up water, and make a cup of tea or cocoa or coffee or something, depending what was available for the Sangha, make it in a big kettle. So it used to take at least an hour to do the whole thing from the start to finish. And a group of Christian missionaries came into the monastery to visit, and not knowing where to go, they came to me as I was boiling water with my charcoal-stained white robes in the kitchen. I'm not sure they were very impressed with me, but they saw I was new. I think maybe because I was new, they were interested to talk to me and find out why I'd become a Buddhist monastic, why I'd come to Thailand. And they said, "Why do you practice Dhamma?" And I said, "Because I want to free myself from suffering." Which was, you could say on one level, the correct answer, but how much I really understood that answer, I'm not sure. I certainly understand it better now than I did then, but still, it was a reasonable answer to give, I think, in the situation. One of them immediately said, "Well, all you need to do," they found out I was from England, and one of them immediately said, "Well, if you go back to England, you'll be free of all this suffering, living in the jungle in Thailand." And I laughed, because it was true in a way. No mosquitoes, wouldn't have to make a fire in England and boil water, and so on. So in one sense, yeah, that's correct. Some of that suffering would disappear if I went back to England. But on a deeper level, obviously, there's other kinds of suffering, and then in Buddhism we talk about the nature of existence is bound up or mixed up with suffering. Just being a human being, subject to birth, aging, sickness and death. A mind that is all over the place, thinking many things, experiencing pleasure and pain, happiness and sadness. There's many kinds of suffering to investigate and learn about and ultimately free yourself from. So simply the suffering of having to deal with mosquitoes and boiling water in the jungle was quite minor, and I already had that much understanding. So I did mention that I'm practicing to understand a deeper kind of suffering and abandon the roots of it, which in Buddhism we say is ignorance, avijja. And that's why I was there in Thailand, because I was studying under a teacher, Ajahn Chah, who I believed had done that very well, and his teachings were full of wisdom and full of encouragement and practical teachings on how to abandon avijja and free oneself from suffering. That much I'd already understood as well. So I said, I didn't want to go back to England just to get away from a little bit of suffering in the forest. I wanted to really go into the teachings of the Dhamma and find out for myself, develop what you might call wisdom or insight. And at least some of the group that were talking to me were quite open to that. They said, "Oh, that's a good answer. Yeah, that's correct." So I passed that one. They moved on and went and talked to someone else, I think. But for me, that made me think, what am I doing in the forest, and what is this wisdom or this understanding that we're trying to gain or develop through our practice? But you have to start somewhere, don't you? You start with the words, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the various teachings of the Buddha about suffering and how to end suffering. You just start there, don't you? With the words, the books, the talks. And for most of us, it takes time to actually practice and come to see how to understand suffering and its causes, according to the model of the Four Noble Truths. What did the Buddha say? Suffering itself, dukkha, is to be known, to be understood, to be known for oneself. And that's from experience, not just as a word in the book, but you have to know it. And when we say know it, we mean in an objective way, to have enough mindfulness, awareness to know that, oh, this is suffering, it's like this. Which is what establishing mindfulness does, which is why teachers talk about being mindful all the time, because it gives you that ability to know suffering, the first noble truth. Not just as a word, but as an experience. To pay attention, oh, it's suffering. Another question or comment you hear quite often, say here in Australia, I hear it all the time, people say, why should I practice Buddhism? I don't have any suffering. And it's true, sometimes we may not have much suffering in our mind or in our life, periodically. But I think if you look at a whole human life, there'll definitely be some periods of suffering if we're honest. Moments of suffering, many moments of suffering, and sometimes very big, intrusive suffering as well. But I'm not sure people are always honest. We like to put a brave face or a positive spin on things sometimes. So some people will say, I have no suffering, I don't need to do this. Okay, well, that's their choice to say that. But in order to really know dukkha, the first noble truth, you have to pay attention, you have to look, you have to watch, observe. And this is why we say practice mindfulness, develop this ability to observe body and mind from moment to moment through your day, or through one period of meditation at least, or ideally through your day and day by day. Because that's where you learn, isn't it? You're learning by establishing mindfulness, paying attention, and then reflecting on what's going on. You can see things. So you may notice, oh, I'm suffering. Could be physical suffering, it's one part of dukkha, painful feelings. Temperature is too hot, too cold, you feel tired, hungry. You sit on the floor long enough, it's hard, so you have to squirm around, move around. Sit on a chair, even lying in a bed long enough, you start to move around because of pain. That's something to observe, isn't it? Oh, it's like this. The human body is subject to painful feelings in one way or another. It's subject to dukkha. Then more subtle, but also quite observable, once you start paying attention with mindfulness, we have mental suffering. We get annoyed with things. We get worried. Someone was saying the other day, just my saying during the meditation, please practice quietly till you hear the sound of the bell, which, as you know, on these sessions is 5 or 10 minutes of quiet meditation, and then there's a bell, or in today's case, you just hear me say, this is the end of the session. Already that sets them up to feel anxiety. When is the bell coming? What do I do? It doesn't take much to make our mind suffer, does it? Just a few words from someone else, a certain situation you're in, certain feeling, a certain place, and already mentally we start to suffer in one way or another. So it's more subtle than physical pain, but it's there, and we notice it once we start becoming mindful. You feel uncomfortable, feel awkward, feel afraid, worried, angry. Perhaps more suffering, or more subtle suffering, is just the suffering of wanting something in that you haven't got. Wanting, expecting. When am I going to get it? How can I get it? I want it now. I haven't got it. Why haven't I got it? That's suffering, isn't it? Wanting something or expecting something that you haven't got yet is already putting pressure on your mind. So many ways that we suffer mentally. The important thing is, as you establish mindfulness, that you might practice particularly in meditation, but not just in meditation, you notice dukkha. You start to notice it, sense it, feel it, observe it. And if mindfulness becomes stronger and your mind becomes clearer, more still, more stable, which is one of the benefits of meditation, that's one of the things you get, you really know suffering as suffering. Oh, it's like this. And for me, and I think for many people, it kind of leads on to the second noble truth. What the Buddha said, suffering has a cause. Because often people misunderstand suffering and think it's just the way it is and it just has to be this way. It's part of life. You have to suffer. And in one sense you could say, yes, correct. Having been born as a human, you're going to have some pain, some suffering. But much of it doesn't have to be, you don't have to experience it. It doesn't have to be like it is. You can certainly influence things and change things, and practicing Dhamma and learning meditation, mindfulness can often relieve you of a lot of suffering quite quickly. The main reason that is because you start to work on the causes of suffering, reveal them or expose them again from the practice of mindfulness. You notice the suffering that we create often very quickly, very immediately in situations like the person who was worried about this 5-minute period where they're having to wait for the period of the sound of a bell to signify the end of the meditation, and they sort of start to be anxious. You start noticing your anxiety. It's a feeling. It's maybe accompanied by a certain train of thought. What do I do now? When's it going to come? But noticing it as a form of movement of mind that creates a feeling of suffering. Mindfulness does that. It helps you to see what's going on, to observe, to know. But the Buddha didn't say the causes of suffering are just to be known. That's just like a step in the process. What he said was they're to be abandoned. And he helped us. So again, that's the initial stages of wisdom, is just receiving the information, the theoretical information, from the Buddha or from a teacher, that this causes of suffering are usually described as tanha, craving. And 3 main types of craving. Kama tanha, sensual craving. Vibhava tanha, craving not to become. Bhava tanha, craving to become. 3 kinds of craving are the cause of suffering, and these are to be abandoned, let go of, finished with from the human mind. And when we describe a Buddha or an Arahant, somebody who's free from suffering, it's because they've fully abandoned craving. So in terms of practice, you read the words, you hear the words first, get the theory, the sort of basic understanding what's going on. There's suffering, it has a cause, craving. But the actual practice of it, as you know, and I certainly know, is very frustrating. Because craving is fast, tricky, it likes to hide, it likes to sneak into the room without you noticing, and then suddenly it's there. Sometimes comes up very strong, very quick. It's quite hard work dealing with craving. Even just identifying craving as craving is hard work, and then abandoning it is even harder work. That's why there's so few arahants in the world. But nevertheless, it's doable. It's not beyond our ability. And if you've come this far, you're listening to this talk, it probably means you already have some understanding of this and some experience for yourself. Probably what you need to do is just do more of what you've already been doing already. So craving is to be known as well, but then to be abandoned. And that's a whole lifetime's work for most people, I think. Getting to know craving as craving. Again, with mindfulness, just knowing it as it is. Because one of the ways craving hides is with a sense of self, my craving, my personality, who I am. I'm kind of mixed up with craving, and obviously we don't even call it craving most of the time. That's a Buddhist term from Dhamma, and nowadays it's a bit out of dated. I guess you could say wanting, desiring, wanting, not wanting, desiring to get rid of, and different kinds of craving. Desiring to be, wanting not to be. So we want to be happy, or a happy person, don't want to be an unhappy person. We want to be successful, we want to be rich, we want to be this, want to be that. We don't want to be whatever it is we don't like and don't identify with. Different kinds of craving that we don't, most of the time, don't even see. And one of the biggest problems with what we call bhavadanha, the craving to become, which is often associated with sort of ambition and all kinds of desires, wanting things. Often people say, well, if you don't want anything, you won't have anything left in your life. You become a kind of vegetable and your life becomes meaningless, worthless. You'll be unambitious, you won't try, you won't do anything if you get rid of that. So it's a subtle point, isn't it? I mean, that can happen, and Buddhists sometimes maybe subject to that, and they become kind of passive and give up, or become a bit depressed sometimes. People who do a lot of vipassana and letting go of all their craving, sometimes they kind of just become like a kind of dried up stone or something. It can happen. So it's a subtle thing, but the Buddha didn't say all desire is wrong or all desire is craving. And there are those positive kinds of craving, desire in Buddhism. We call that, the desire, the willingness, and the desire to practice. Because you want to end suffering, that desire is considered something useful. And it's not craving, because craving always leads to suffering, whereas the desire to practice the Dhamma, cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path, is leading to the end of suffering. So it's going in a different direction, but it's still, you might say, something that motivates you, leads you to act, leads you to do things. And you might say it's coming from wisdom again. When you recognize suffering, then you want to get beyond your suffering. You want to be more peaceful, more happy. You want something better if you're suffering. That search for the way out of suffering, sometimes we call it a noble search, a really good search. And it leads to a movement and a desire and certain activities. We call that the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. That's something to be cultivated, developed. And that takes effort, takes a certain motivation, desire. But we call that the wholesome desire that leads on to practice. Whereas craving is going in the other direction. It's always the wanting, and it agitates the mind, makes the mind feel worse, to put it simply. The more craving there is, the worse you feel. But that's something to be observed as well. That helps. The more you can identify craving, what you might call negative desire, the more you suffer. And that's something you have to see or understand for yourself from your experience. So like Gamadanha, observe how we're always wanting to experience things with our five senses and even the mind. So in meditation, often you're not trying to stimulate your external physical senses during a meditation, but we still love to fantasize and imagine and create pictures and images and think about all kinds of stuff and have all kinds of wonderful ideas during our meditation. All of that can be a kind of craving. So our six senses are like doorways for a lot of craving. The more obvious ones are like food and sexual desire and desire for comfort and pleasure and distraction and this and that. And that also includes dissatisfaction when you don't get what you want. So you want a certain kind of food and it comes and it doesn't taste like it should, so you get annoyed or irritated. You want something, you haven't got it, so you get irritated. If it's happening a lot, you might call this vipavadanha, where I don't want to be a person who doesn't have what they want. Give me what I want, and I don't want this because it's not what I want. It becomes stronger and stronger. We call that vipavadanha, a state where you are very unhappy, discontent, want to get rid of. So often it's very closely linked to Gamadanha, sensual craving, is also linked to Vipavadanha, not wanting. And then Bhavadanha covers everything, including just wanting to be alive. Most people would say that's quite a reasonable kind of desire, but it's still a form of suffering. As you see, as you approach your death, as you get older, or sometimes, unfortunately, when you're in a situation where there's a lot of threat or risk to you, you see Bhavadanha. There's some danger, whatever it is. Like the person I knew who was near the volcano and it started erupting, and they said, they ran faster than they've ever run before because it was a volcano and you want to get out of there. That's Bhavadanha probably at work. Or, if you're in the forest and you meet a wild animal that can hurt you or kill you, sometimes you run, or you can jump higher than you could jump before. Bhavadanha. There's only one kind of Bhavadanha, but the desire to live, to be, to exist. Also just the desire for certain kinds of life. We have, I want a life like this, I want to be a person like this, and we have our dream, our imagination has sort of created this dream, how we want to be, and we think our life should be, Bhavadanha, and how we know we don't want our life to be. I don't want to be like this, I don't want things to be like it is now, Vipavadanha, getting rid of again. So I'm just summarizing here, but this is the cause of suffering, and as we practice developing mindfulness, reflect on our experience, you might notice different kinds of danha, craving at work. This is all the second noble truth, and sometimes, as you practice more, you become very sharp or quick just to recognize that this will lead to suffering. You don't need to think about it a lot. Once you've recognized, say, qualities such as anger, fear, worry, jealousy, greed, for what they are, you get to know them better. Mindfulness gives you that ability to pay attention, get to know the face of things, the characteristics of things. So, this is going to lead to suffering. I've seen it before, I know it. So you have less and less doubts or fuzziness about the whole thing. But you can now develop some wisdom which will help you deal with craving, because what you want is the end of craving. So one thing that helps is observing the impermanence of it. Craving comes and goes, and that's like, for most people, that's a real key or way into developing some true or deep, profound wisdom. The wisdom that knows craving is impermanent. It comes, it goes, it arises, it ceases. That's the nature of it. This mind is, we say, it's a conditioned thing. And as you pay more attention to your mind in meditation, you notice that craving conditions the mind. It agitates you, makes you unhappy in one way or another. But also it changes. You have a lot of craving, a little craving, and no craving. When you practice meditation regularly, you'll probably find there are periods when you can actually keep your craving quite quiet. Say when you're meditating on the breath, for example, and your mind is with the breath, gradually letting go of everything else temporarily. Usually you feel quite relaxed, calm, stable. That's because craving has gone quiet. You finally get a rest from it. It's like a rest from the chatter, the desiring, the wanting. That gives you an insight. It's not the complete end of craving, but it's like a temporary end of craving. It's a temporary freedom of mind. We call it temporary liberation. The technical term Tatthanga Vimutti in Buddhism, but you don't need to know that. You just know that, when your mindfulness is more strong, you're with the breath, body and mind become stable, calm, still. Why do you feel good? Because your mind gets a break from the craving. But it's temporary, because even samadhi, part of the path, is temporary. What we then have to do is go on and use that samadhi as a platform for developing even more panya, more wisdom, more insight. But because craving by its nature is impermanent, we can use that knowledge, that understanding to our advantage. So next time, you've developed some samadhi, eventually craving will re-emerge. Quicker or slower, it will start to come back up into your experience. So you've meditated for a while, you're quite calm, peaceful, and that's good, enjoy it. But sooner or later you start thinking, wanting, maybe negative thoughts and emotions start to re-emerge. Now you have to follow up, a bit like a detective or a spy or something. You start following up and say, oh, craving is re-emerging, here we go. But it's impermanent. You know that. You've seen it before. As you were letting go of craving to calm your mind down, as craving re-emerges, you say, I know this is impermanent. And you follow up watching the impermanent nature of craving. That desire for something, the wanting, the not wanting, the agitation, the movements of mind. It moves, it changes. It's not permanent. And that's an insight you can keep developing, especially if your mindfulness is more strong. You can keep watching. Doesn't mean to say you can't go about your daily business. Once you've meditated, you still have to do things, go places, do things. But now you're watching craving come and go, and you're probably better at it after your meditation. You still need to practice this. You train in it, you practice in reflecting on the changing nature of craving, but you can hopefully see it a bit more clearly and you're a bit quicker. And also you can see, well, craving has arisen, craving's passed away, it's gone, at least temporarily. What's gone is not a person or a being or any kind of lasting self, we say, because it comes and goes. One of the definitions of a self is something that's always there, isn't it? It's like something that exists, it's always there, it's kind of substantial. When you see craving as impermanent, even if it's only just a small bit of craving, a small moment of desire, wanting something or not wanting something, but then it's gone, and you know it's gone, and you're aware of that because you're mindful, paying attention, you can also say that craving is not self. If it was a self, it should be there all day long, all the time. And that's one of the delusions we get into as well, because we have this sort of attachment to an idea of self. Often our mental activity, the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we spin in our mind kind of are trying to reinforce this idea that it's me and I'm always here. So if we're identifying with our craving as self, well, we often fool ourselves or kid ourselves that, yeah, it's me, I'm always angry, I'm always greedy, I'm always like this, my life is always like this, like that. But that's a story we create in our mind and tell ourselves. As we practice more mindfulness, you start seeing more clearly, going beyond the story and realizing, oh, the story is just a story. It's not necessarily the truth. And maybe you can appreciate some moments where craving goes quiet and you know, oh, this is impermanent. What's impermanent is not really me, a person, a lasting self. And you may even see where before you were identifying with a certain kind of craving, you used a habitual reaction to something, you're always getting angry with this person or this situation, or always going to a certain kind of desire for something you find brings you pleasure. But now, because you're mindful and reflecting, maybe you say, it's actually just a temporary state of mind. I've enjoyed many things before in my life, but they all arose and passed away. They're not that good because they're not there all the time. I've been angry, upset, suffering, sad many times in my life, but maybe at this moment you're mindful that you're not experiencing that kind of suffering or anger or fear or whatever it was. When you contemplate impermanence, you're also helping yourself to understand that this idea of being a self, a person who is a certain way, is not quite correct. We are made up of a whole process of things conditioning each other, affecting each other. So memories, thoughts, feelings, the body. But when we practice mindfulness, we're paying much closer attention to it all. We see there's a whole mass of different conditions influence each other, arising, ceasing. So the sense of self changes. The way you view what you call a self, the way you view yourself and your idea of a self changes. It's not that there's nothing there. You still have a body and feelings and thoughts, but the way you look at them, your attitude and your view changes. We call this dispersing the sense of self. Normally when we have a sense of self attaching to the body, to the feelings, to the thoughts, as me, mine, myself, they seem very real, very solid, very permanent. The practice of mindfulness and developing wisdom, insight, or panya, doing the opposite, helping you to disperse that. And then you experience more periods of the third noble truth, cessation, freedom. If things go peaceful, at first just small moments, temporary moments maybe. But the idea is you keep doing this over and over again and you get better at it. Maybe one day you reach a point where you completely remove certain defilements, certain kinds of craving completely, and they never emerge again, they never come back. And when we talk about progress in the Buddhist path towards Nibbana, it's like moments where certain kinds of craving are dropped and never return. They're given up, they're seen for what they are to the point where you just know, oh, that's craving, that leads to suffering, don't pick it up. It's like once you know something is painful or it's going to hurt you, you don't want to touch it, you don't want to get involved with it anymore. And that just becomes an understanding that's always with you, or we say wisdom or true knowledge, vision of the way things are. So this is the Buddhist practice, and it starts in small ways, just moments of mindfulness, moments of reflection, realizing you've been attaching to something, craving something, and it's just suffering. But hopefully if you practice more and more, those moments join up and become deeper, more profound, and you experience some of the cessation on a more profound level as well, the cessation of suffering. Then it doesn't matter what other people say. They say, Buddhism is wrong, Buddhism is like this, Buddhism is like that. It doesn't matter. If you have your own wisdom, that is a quality that doesn't leave you, and you own it, as it were. And therefore, the words of other people, you can listen to them and reflect on them, but you don't have to believe them or let them influence you that much, because you have your own knowledge and understanding. That's the purpose of developing wisdom. Something that you have with you all the time that can't be shaken or taken away from you. Even, if everything around you falls apart, your own wisdom won't fall apart. If it's true wisdom, it won't disappear. We call it, in Buddhism, we call it Ariya Sapa, like your noble wealth. One of the kinds of noble wealth is the wisdom, the insight that frees your mind from suffering, helps you to understand the Four Noble Truths. It's your true wealth that travels with you. Can't be stolen. What did the Buddha say? Thieves can't take it. Earthquakes can't destroy it. It's always in your heart, and whatever the physical world and the world around you is doing, that doesn't matter. Your true wisdom will stay with you. So, I've talked for quite a bit. Maybe I'll leave the talk there, and afterwards, if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them for you.